Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of TCN Presents the Cultured Pull List. I'm Mike, and I'm joined by my co-host Luke.
Hey guys.
Luke, what are we going to be covering today?
In today's episode, we will be covering the first four issues of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
All right, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. So, as many of you know, last week James Gunn announced the first few projects in the new DCU slate. And a lot of them are based on actual comic books and comic series. And he actually tweeted soon after that saying the actual comics that his DCU will be based on. We saw All-Star Superman, The Authority, the original run, Swamp Thing, and Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. So also, since he's tweeted this, a lot of these books have been selling out on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured we would cover some of these. So we're starting with Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Since it's an 8-issue run, we're only going to do the first 4 issues. But I guess this is Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, issues 1 through 4. I guess this is going to be part 1 of our coverage. And it has the same credits for the entire book, but the author is Tom King. The artist is Bilquis Evely. The colorist is Matthias Lopez, and the inker is Clayton Cowles. I meant to put the release there, but it started on August 2021, and it ended its run in its 8th issue in April 2022. So it's a pretty new book.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into the summary. We're going to do a summary, and then we're just going to talk about our thoughts. So let's jump right into this summary. So this book, even though it's a Supergirl title, it actually is narrated by this young girl named Ruthie Marie Knoll. But the Ruthie and Marie is spelled with a Y instead of an I, which we would normally spell alike.
Yeah.
And she seems to live on like a sort of medieval-ish world, but it opens with her father being killed by this man named Krem, Krem of the Yellow Hills. And he stabs him through with a blade and leaves the sword in his body. And Ruthie ends up finding her father's body, and she takes the sword that Krem left in him and wonders why he left it there in the first place. But she ends up keeping the blade, seemingly to exact her own revenge at some point. And she assumes, or she makes an educated guess, that Krem is a King's agent that came to test her family's loyalty, and apparently her father failed the test. Krem actually came to the family asking for lodging.
Yeah.
And ended up staying the night with them. And then the next morning, he and the father talked, or I guess I think it might have been that evening. I don't remember exactly, but he and the father talked and started talking about the king. And Ruthie was thinking that her dad didn't, show enough loyalty or said something wrong, and that's why Krem ended up killing him.
Yeah.
But she and her family meet after that, and she has 6 brothers, and they all want to go and exact revenge pretty much. So they start arguing over who's going to go. But she ends up taking matters into her own hands and just going herself. And her mother tells her to take her father's old steed. So she does and sets out on her quest to find this. Well, first of all, she kind of wants to find somebody to help her in her revenge quest. So she ends up in this tavern where she meets this guy who has definitely not skipped his steroids, that's for sure. A bit of a musclehead there, but she attempts to hire him to go with her to track down Krem and kill him, and she's basically putting up her sword as payment. And he basically agrees, but he takes the sword and is like, I'm going to go kill Krem, you stay here. And she's like, that's not part of the deal. And he's basically like, learn your place, woman, and slaps her in the face. And she ends up just kind of lying there on the tavern while he starts to leave, starts towards the door. But as he does, a blonde woman who we know is Supergirl is sitting in the corner next to the door and ends up stopping him and telling him to give back the sword. And he definitely doesn't want to. And they kind of exchange words, and she ends up revealing that she's there on her 21st birthday. Basically, this is her version of a celebration.
Right.
And she is with Crypto, which is cool. But she ends up fighting with this meathead, and she wins, but she is hurt herself because this planet has a red sun. So she's basically depowered here.
Right.
But she's still able to beat the crap out of this guy and take his sword as well as Ruthie's. And I believe she pretty much like is so wasted she passes out because she wakes up in a bed of the tavern with Ruthie there. And something about this Supergirl that I think really it's kind of a small thing, but I think it distinguishes her from Superman. Is she swears a lot in this book.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, they kind of bleep it out with the typical like comic symbols.
Yeah.
But she swears a lot, and there's this funny exchange where Ruthie says, you often speak of this. I'm assuming it's shit or fuck or something, and she says, especially when your agony becomes acute. This is your husband, and I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I just always assume that she's saying fuck or some variation of that, and it's very funny.
Yeah, it is pretty funny, and like my brain kind of like inserts like the word in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though it's just symbols, it just kind of keeps the dialogue flowing in my brain.
Right.
But she attempts to hire Kara after she sees what she does to the dude in the bar, or Supergirl. I guess they don't actually refer to her to Kara yet. It's just Supergirl. I think that's because that's what she's calling herself. But she basically tells Ruthie to stop a revenge quest and not to. She even says something like, "Don't kill anybody. Killing is bad," or something. And she ends up rowing off with Crypto in a boat, but Ruthie jumps in the water and swims after her. And when she follows Supergirl to her destination, like on the other side of the river or lake, whatever it is, she sees Supergirl's ship that she took to get there, which kind of blows her mind because she's never seen a spaceship like that before. Yeah. They seem to live in a pretty primitive planet, like I kind of said this earlier, but kind of like medieval, Middle Ages, like Earth kind of thing. But it's obviously an alien planet with a red sun. And Supergirl tries to get Ruthie to leave, but she won't. And she ends up kind of breaking down and saying like her entire world is dead, and like everything she cared about is gone. And this does seem to touch Supergirl. It kind of seems to remind Supergirl of her own origins. And she seems to be kind of maybe changing her mind, but then Krem shows up and shoots her in the chest and ends up shooting Crypto too, because Crypto goes after him. And yeah, Krem is accompanied by that meathead from the bar, who I guess took him there. I guess he knew where he was and was like, this girl is after you. I'll take her to you and you can kill her. But Supergirl does end up beating the crap out of these guys. And it seems like even though she is like deep powered, she still has some powers because she's able to take like 3 arrows to the chest and survive. Yeah. She is bleeding, but she still goes over and beats the crap out of them. And she knocks out the one guy, the musclehead guy, but Krem manages to run away while she kneels over Crypto to see how he's doing. And he ends up actually getting in her ship and flying away in it.
Right.
To where they know not. No. And that is pretty much the end of this first part. So going to the next issue, we open with Supergirl and Ruthie having to confront one of the greatest horrors known to man or alien, public transportation. And it's pretty bleak. They're kind of squished together, and these aliens keep leaning on Ruthie, and she keeps like asking them to stop, and she ends up having to let Supergirl kind of be the muscle in these situations.
Right.
But they end up stopping at this bar on one of their one of these space station stops, and there's this alien there that wants to get revenge on Superman. And he's basically like, "Oh, well, you're Supergirl, next best thing," and he doesn't seem to be threatened by her at all.
Right.
And in the or like I guess it's not really a voiceover, obviously, but if it were like not a comic, it would be a voiceover.
Yeah, like narration.
The narration. Ruthie mentions that there were several encounters like this where basically people recognize her as like Supergirl, but they really don't take her seriously, and she ends up beating the crap out of them.
I think this is a bit of like a meta thing where like people in the real world don't like necessarily understand the character of Supergirl.
I think a little bit also kind of a commentary on people not taking women seriously.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's part of it too. But they end up like spending like weeks on this transport. I guess like a space bus. they end up spending like lots of weeks on this, and they end up in this one space station where the driver actually calls Supergirl to the front and is basically like, that picture was supposed to go there, but yeah, she beat the crap out of this guy. But this guy basically says that they need Supergirl's help because there's this thing called a something dragon, a carpane dragon, which apparently eats anything metal, which is this right here. And it's in their way. It's about to eat their whole space bus thing. And she's like, well, I'd like to help you, but I have no powers. So, and he's like, oh, well, I guess we're dead. But she ends up going to the passenger, the main like hold or whatever, where everyone's freaking out. And she basically yells at them to give her what she calls reds, which are apparently these red pills that are actually red kryptonite in melted lead. So very interesting pills. Apparently they give normal people or aliens like hallucinations or visions. So I guess it's kind of alien LSD, but apparently if Kryptonians take it, their visions become reality, which is interesting because red kryptonite is a very kind of an interesting thing in the comics. It in like a lot of the pre-crisis stuff, it gave Superman, it gave Kryptonians like random powers, or it kind of gave them random effects. Like sometimes it increased Superman's powers, sometimes it like turned him into a dragon, and like all this crazy stuff. So it seems like this is kind of playing off of that and making it like a random pill. But it ends up turning her into Phoenix pretty much from X-Men. But it's pretty cool though. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. The art is great.
Oh yeah, and she's able to defeat this dragon. And then they just kind of continue on their way, and there's this small scene that doesn't seem super important on its face, but Ruthie puts a lot of emphasis on it, where they stop in this bathroom, and she mentioned earlier in the narration that she and her family bathe like once a year or something. So Supergirl is washing her hands, and she turns to Ruthie and is like, are you going to wash your hands? It's been like a month. And she's like, I don't really know how. So Supergirl ends up actually like teaching her how to wash her hands, which is kind of interesting. You never really like think of having to teach somebody, at least not of Ruthie's age. But it seems like she's like maybe like a young teenager. They never really say.
Right.
And then the narration seems to be like in a past tense, like her in the future writing all this. So this also leads to a conversation where Ruthie asks Supergirl if she ever tried to avenge, the death of her parents and her planet, which kind of off screen or, off page, it seems Supergirl told Ruthie some of her past.
One of my, I'll get into this later, but one of my criticisms of this book is that there's a lot of narration.
Yeah.
And I feel like the panel you just had up is a good example of it, where like she asks Supergirl if she ever avenged her family. There's a picture of her and there's a box explaining the emotion, Like that middle
Yeah.
one right there. I feel like
Yeah.
if you got rid of that, it would have been just as effective, if not more effective. Just the art speaking for itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I do kind of like that line though, where she says like, in that reply, Supergirl gave her like, no, I didn't. She does say like in that response, she heard a lifetime of regret.
Hmm.
I did like that line though. There was kind of I do kind of agree with you about the excessive narration.
Yeah.
But anyway, after this whole encounter, at some point, they do a lot of time jumping. That is kind of
Yes.
part of the narration. They're just like, well, weeks later, and then
Hmm.
like a lot of stuff happened, but then this happened, and
Right.
basically this alien um, is leaning on Ruthie again, and she basically tells him to like stop, in a very
Hmm.
long-winded way. And something I do like about the narration though is it is kind of almost um like Victorian era speech, or like
Yeah.
kind of like
Shakespearean.
Shakespearean. There we go. Yeah, Shakespearean, which I kind of like, especially
Hmm.
considering it matches kind of the world she lives on,
Right.
kind of that old English stuff. But
Hmm.
this alien tries to basically rip her head off. No, and Supergirl just elbows him in the head, and that's kind of the end of that. He ends up just like passing out, which kind of shows that her powers are returning.
Right.
That they're near a yellow star, and this is basically when they come to the end of their terminal, the end of the tracks,
Hmm.
basically, even though
Yeah.
it's space. But and during this, as they're landing, Ruthie does narrate again, and she kind of goes back and mentions how Supergirl like, took Crypto and put him on the boat that she had, her rowboat, and took him to, I guess, a doctor, but Ruthie calls him a mender,
Hmm.
and he manages to help Supergirl. But apparently, the arrows that Krem used were dipped in some sort of hunter poison, and it didn't affect. It doesn't affect humans or people, but it affects animals.
Yeah.
So it is killing Crypto, and without knowing what the actual hunter poison is, because those are unique to each hunter,
Hmm.
he
Right.
can't really help Crypto. So that kind of makes it personal for Supergirl. She has to find Krem to
Hmm.
figure out his poison, his mixture, and save Crypto. I kind of feel like this scene should have been earlier. They just sort of like
Hmm.
skip, like, like after Krem escapes, we have no idea what
Right.
happens to Crypto. I was even thinking when they were in the bus or whatever it is initially, I'm like, where's Crypto? Like, we didn't really learn where he is, and then we finally get to see
Hmm.
in this panel here. But
Right.
I kind of wish they'd done that earlier.
Hmm.
But oh
Yeah,
well,
this
it's
kind
life.
of this is another criticism, not necessarily of this book, but sort of
Hmm.
as Tom King's writing style in general. Like he
Hmm.
doesn't really have a whole lot of respect for supporting characters. And in this
Mm,
story, it's just Crypto the Superdog, so it's not that big of a deal.
yeah,
But when he was writing Batman, like his supporting characters are kind of a big deal. And so like,
yeah,
he'll
that's true.
just shoot Nightwing, he'll, kill Alfred, this and that. And he's just, it's
Yeah.
so yeah, that's
Okay.
one style of Tom King that I'm not a huge fan of.
Gotcha. Yeah, I kind of see, like, on the one hand, I kind of feel like, it's kind of a ballsy thing to do, but on the other
Right.
hand, you kind of have to be sparing with it and
Yeah.
like make it count, make it
Mhm.
matter. But
Right.
this part ends with Supergirl basically regaining her powers and
Mhm.
being able to fly, but also saying that she can see everything, seemingly that she has her, X-ray vision and telescopic vision back.
Yeah.
So that is that. You want to take over from here, Luke?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start with issue 3. It opens
Okay.
up with a guy, he's later referred to as a lawman. I'm not exactly sure what
Hmm.
position that is, but he's sort of
Yeah.
building a tower of cards. And
Hmm.
they ask him like, "Hey, have you seen Krem?" And he doesn't say no, but he doesn't really say yes either. So Supergirl's
Yeah.
kind of frustrated, and so she just blows over his tower, and then they leave.
Yeah.
And as they're leaving, they're talking, and Supergirl basically says that she could tell that he was lying, but not because of any of her superpowers, just because of like social skills or whatever. She could like kind of
Right.
deduce that he was hiding something.
Yeah, and she said something like along the lines of like their biology is too complex to just be able to like tell from his heartbeat, because that's what
Right.
Ruthie asked. And yeah, it
Yeah.
was more she just could tell he was lying through what you said.
Mhm. And then they go to a hotel, and when they're signing up, there's two separate columns. There's the
Mhm.
blue column and the red and the purple column.
Yeah.
One of the interesting lines from the hotel clerk, I guess, is she says, "Oh yeah, there used to be a bunch of them," referring to the purples, "but they
Mhm.
didn't stay in 7B. Don't worry about that." And so it's kind of interesting foreshadowing as to like the culture of this planet.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because I think Supergirl asked if purples referred to like off-worlders or
mhm.
something, so I kind of assumed that's what it meant for a few panels until it made
Yeah,
more clear that there were purples. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then where was I? Oh, yeah, very cryptic. So they stay in the hotel. They're going to like a restaurant the next day. A
Hmm.
similar conversation with the waitress. There's kind of
Yeah.
very cryptic. She's asking the same questions but not giving a whole lot of answers.
Hmm.
And then someone tries to shoot them in the night. I wasn't sure
Right.
if we know who this was yet, or because I haven't read past issue 4, so I'm not sure if
Yeah.
um, it was anybody we know yet, or probably not. But okay. Yeah. That's the next day. They're trying to be like, everything here is so perfect, yet there's like some kind of dark secret thing happening.
Hmm.
And so they go see the mayor,
Yeah. Yeah.
and again, similar conversation. So she gets mad. She throws the desk at him.
Hmm.
And then they do this kind of thing where Supergirl has Ruthie on her back, and they start to do this a lot later on. But this is the first time that they do it, and they're kind of
Hmm.
flying around the planet trying to figure out the history, what they're hiding.
Yeah.
They come to the ruins of this place called Purple Town,
Hmm.
and then Supergirl's now starting to put it together. So she attacks these two guards, and this is interesting because the story of what Purple Town is and the culture of this planet was not revealed through the guards' dialogue, but through
No.
Ruthie's narration, which I thought was an
Right.
interesting choice.
Yeah.
But basically, there was kind of this separation of like the blue people are like um, high society, the purple people are more like low society, second
Hmm.
degree kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then this gang of pirates, basically called Barbon's buy grades,
Yeah.
um, attacked the planet, and the Blues were like, "Well, hey, don't attack us. We'll give you money if you just leave us alone and attack the Purples." So, essentially, yeah, Krem was the one who gave him the idea to do that. So Krem joins the buy brigade,
Well,
and
it
essentially,
was. I think it was that like they wanted to pay them, but they didn't have enough money.
right,
And Krem overheard like the mayor and the guard talking about it, and he was basically like, "Why don't you give them as much money as you can, and then like give them the purples
mhm,
to
yeah,
kill? You know, because they just kill for fun, pretty much is their
yes,
thing."
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then so after that, they kind of take Krem because they're like, "Well, you're kind of a sicko like us, so you could join us and we could
Right?
just kill people."
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the end of issue 3.
Yeah.
Um, Moving on to issue 4, and issue 4 is kind of like a montage more. There's like a scene here, then you move on to a different scene,
Yeah.
and then scene. There's not a whole lot of connectivity between the individual scenes
Hmm.
in this issue. So they're talking to an alien who's super like beat up, and he says that he may have been attacked by Krem, and in flashbacks we find out that he was.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, him and his friend were attacked by the Byrogand, and his friend died, but this alien who's
Right.
speaking barely made it out alive.
Hmm.
And then so Supergirl and Ruthie, they find another alien who's of the same race, and he's burying their dead, and he's basically like,
Mm,
if I can
yeah.
bury all of them individually before the end of the day, then we don't have to bury them in a mass grave, and so at least we can have that kind of luxury.
Hmm.
And so Supergirl basically takes a shovel and does it all for him. And then they meet another giant alien, and I wanted to point out this artwork is very similar to Jack Kirby's artwork.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, it
Yeah,
reminds me a lot of the New Gods and even the
yeah,
Eternals a little bit.
yeah. Eternals, exactly. Yeah. Jack Kirby. Supergirl helps her vent her emotions because she's like he has all this emotion kind of built up, and she's just
Yeah.
been pushing it down, and then she's like, just hit me because I'm immortal. It doesn't matter. And so
Yeah.
she helps her kind of like vent out all the emotions because they were also attacked by the pirates.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to another race of aliens. I don't believe we see this race, but they kind of Ruthie basically says that they record everything. And so Supergirl goes in to see the tapes, but she's like, Ruthie, you can't come in. You got to stay here. And so it appears like it was a really long time because when
Yeah.
Supergirl comes back, Ruthie's asleep, and Supergirl's just like completely out of it, implying that what she saw was pretty heinous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we go to one of the pirates being publicly executed, and I don't know if this is intentional, but his mask kind of looks like the original Red Hood, like when the Joker
Yeah,
wore
I
it.
see that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I just found that interesting. Next, they go to a basically what they're doing is I didn't explain this clear enough, but they're kind of just going to all the different places where these pirates did, and they're trying to just follow them essentially.
Yeah, and
And
find
so
Krem.
yeah, exactly. And so the next stop is this monk planet, and she says that the monks didn't fight back at all. They were just kind of chanting while they were
Right.
being killed. Um, and this is kind of Supergirl's breaking point. So she says she can't scream because she'll destroy the entire planet. So she basically just flies into a sun and just kind of like explodes there.
Right.
And at the end of the issue, Supergirl's like, Ruthie, you can't be here anymore because this is just too dangerous. But obviously, Ruthie refuses, and that's the end of issue 4.
Yeah. So, yeah, what are your thoughts so far on this? You kind of mentioned we kind of mentioned a few things as
Yeah,
we did the summary, but what are
right.
your overall thoughts about the first half of this
I'm
Woman
kind
of
of
Tomorrow?
mixed.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Tom King, but I think this is one of his better works. Yeah, there's just a lot of narration, and so it feels
Yeah.
like super dense trying to get through it all.
Mhm.
But I really like the way that the characterization of Supergirl, she's sort of jaded, and
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what in my mind that's what makes her different than Superman because they have
Mhm.
similar powers, but she's like a young adult, sometimes a teenager, but in this one she's
Yeah.
21, and she's just kind of like jaded and just kind of more angry because in some versions she becomes a Red
Yeah.
Lantern even.
Yeah,
So
she's like very passionate. I don't know if I should say like more passionate than Superman, but like
yeah,
she has more top problem like controlling it, like you said with the
yes,
anger thing.
yeah, she has the powers of Superman, but not necessarily the restraint of Superman.
Right.
So that's
Yeah,
what makes her
exactly.
interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I really didn't have much expectations going into this.
Mhm.
Kind of like you said earlier, I think a lot of times they just kind of make Supergirl like a Superman clone.
Right.
So I didn't really know, and like a lot of her comics and everything, I can't really like name a specific villain of hers. Like
Mhm.
she pretty much just goes up against the Superman villains, from what I know, and like
Yeah.
there not only is she a lot of times portrayed as a clone of Superman, but even her like adventures and storylines feel like a
Mhm.
Superman
Yeah.
storyline, just replaced with Supergirl.
Mm.
So I really didn't know what to expect going into this.
Yeah.
But I am really liking that it is kind of like a sci-fi revenge
Yeah.
quest adventure with a little bit of like medieval stuff at the beginning.
Mhm.
I thought that's kind of a cool mix and kind of making Supergirl in a way kind of like a like medieval like quester character, kind of like
Mhm.
Geralt from The Witcher or something like that.
Yeah.
Which I
Yeah.
thought was kind of an interesting take. And I also like that they show her both not having powers and having
Mhm.
powers. I don't
Right.
really like it when they like throw a character into the situation like, oh, they have no powers, and like, but then it's like, what's the point of having this character's comic then if they're not really the character, you know?
Mm.
But I like that there's both. You get to see
Yeah.
her that you get to see that she's formidable
Mhm.
without her powers.
Right.
But then also you get to see her being the classic Supergirl, basically, having the powers of Superman.
Mhm.
So I thought all that was cool. I definitely, yeah, I think the narration, I have mixed feelings about it because
Mhm.
I like it's kind of unique that it's Ruthie narrating, and it's a Supergirl comic, but it's kind of Ruthie's story in a way.
Right.
But I do feel like it becomes kind of a crutch sometimes,
Mm.
instead of just like showing stuff, which is kind of the whole point of comics, is you can
Yeah.
tell us the story, with dialogue and some narration, but mostly
Right.
with the pictures, with the
Yeah.
art, the images. So I kind of feel like it becomes a crutch sometimes, especially when it just sort of is like, oh, and there was a lot of months and weeks between this, but I'm going to cut it out because it's going to be
Right.
boring. I'm like, oh,
Right.
okay, but and it's kind of there's a lot of like plot points that aren't shown. Ruthie's
Mhm.
just kind of like future Ruthie at whatever point she's writing this. It's just kind of like,
Right.
so she told me this, or this happened, or
Mhm.
I thought this, instead of like using it to just like showing the emotion or
Right.
showing us what happens. So I definitely see, your points with that, and I definitely
Mhm.
agree. I
Yeah.
I I thought it was interesting at first, but it gets to be a bit much, and I think also with the storytelling, some of the things aren't linear or like explained
Mhm.
enough. Like there are things that Ruthie really seems to like think are important,
Yeah.
and they seem very minor
Mhm.
in the actual like an alien says something about like happy as peach pie or something, and she makes this
Right.
big deal like, oh, I've been to a bunch of planets since then, I've never found peach pie very happy, which
Right.
I feel like would work really well in like a novel, but I
Mm.
feel like in this it kind of
Yeah.
broke the flow of what was happening and kind of seemed
Right.
like a
Right.
really insignificant thing in the grand scheme of the whole conversation,
Mhm.
because she said it right after the um, desk clerk at the hotel like exploded on Supergirl.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. There are definitely stuff like that, but I will say the art is really
Mm.
really cool.
The art is
Like
incredible. Yeah.
there are just a few like trying to
I have,
find the
I
names
don't know how well
again.
this is gonna show up on the screen, but I have one of
Okay.
the images as my phone background, actually.
Yeah,
It's one of the
yeah,
alternate covers,
that's
I think.
both Bilquis Evely and Matthias Lopez, because he's the colorist.
Yeah.
Both the art and just the colors are really
Mhm.
really beautiful, and I wasn't really sure
Absolutely.
going into this because like the main cover and everything, like it looks cool, but
Yeah.
at the same time it didn't really do a whole lot for me.
Mm.
But then just seeing the actual artwork, like the actual characters remind me very slightly of like John Romita Jr.'s art
Mm.
and John Romita, but the actual like just that shot and
Right.
trying to find like a few of the space ones are really nice too, like that
Mm.
just looks
Yeah.
super cool.
And
And
there's one of the images
yeah,
from issue 4 where the kind of the nature kinda looks very Dr. Seuss, yeah,
that
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just really pretty, and like it's just
Mhm.
really nice to look at, which I think
Right.
some comics I kind of don't pay as much like I'm more paying attention to the dialogue, not the art, and I feel like that's
Mhm.
kind of a bit of a referendum on the art because it's
Yeah.
just not really like grabbing me. I feel like if the art is really
Right.
nice, I'm gonna stop and be like, "Whoa, let me just look at this before I read the
Yeah.
the speech bubbles."
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about this book
I
so
mean, you
far?
kinda mentioned it, but this is
Yeah.
sort of a very different story than what Dark Crisis, what we were just
Mm-hmm.
covering, because it's like the story of Dark Crisis is pretty straightforward. This is the heroes,
Yeah.
these are the villains, they're gonna fight. This
Yeah.
one's a lot more complex,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, it's more of like a sci-fi adventure unless you're
Yeah.
normal superhero story.
I am this book does really make me look forward to what they do with the Supergirl movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not going to be a direct adaptation, but if they
Mhm.
do anything like this and make it like a sci-fi adventure like this, it could be
Yeah.
really cool.
Oh,
Especially
yeah.
all of the art in this, I feel like could be adapted
Oh,
super
yeah.
well with
Absolutely.
with CGI
Mhm.
and even practical effects and stuff. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really look forward to that, and also
Mhm.
just seeing Supergirl be like this, where like James
Right.
Gunn did say she's kind of jaded, which she
Yeah.
is, but not to the like she's not like jaded in like a Wolverine or like a Punisher sort of way. She's
Right.
still got that Supergirl and Superman spirit to her. Like we
Mhm.
see in this, she is kind. She does help people that were affected by those pirates,
Right.
those raiders, but like we said, like I said earlier, like she swears a lot and she just
Mhm.
kind of doesn't take shit.
Yeah.
She's a lot more snarky than Superman normally would be. So I really like that
Mhm.
she's a different person. She's got Superman's
Right.
power, but she's a different person. I really hope
Right.
they adapt that well in the movie
Yeah.
when that
Yeah.
comes out. Probably not
Yeah.
till like 2027. All right. So before we end this episode, I just wanted to add a segment that we're going to be doing going forward. We're going to be calling it the our cultured picks. So this is just going to be some issues we've been reading somewhat recently that we didn't necessarily want to do a whole episode on just because we couldn't or just, didn't have enough story or something like that. But we still recommend that you go pick it up at your local comic shop or something. So my pick is Punisher War Journal. Brother. Apparently, these are a series of one-shots. These Punisher War Journal, they published them last year. I've only read Brother, but what's really interesting about this whole storyline is that Punisher is now like the kind of the enforcer, almost the leader though of like the Hand now. And they are, he's basically like their assassin, which I think is an interesting place to take Punisher. I feel like he's been just kind of doing the same thing for so long, which I love the Punisher, but I feel like this is an interesting place to take him and kind of take him away from just, spraying machine guns at people. He's more relying on swords and stealth here.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is like the logo on his chest is different. It means something to the Hand. I'm not really sure what. It's like some sort of beast that I don't know if they worship it or what, but it's really interesting because he is their assassin, but they almost revere him as like their leader almost as well.
Okay.
But it's also interesting in this seeing Punisher go on missions, but also having backup. The Hand has his back, and he's going on missions with the Hand. So it's not just him on his own or like a team up issue. It's like them. He's part of the group, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic to see.
Yeah.
So I would definitely pick up this one, Punisher War Journal Brother. I haven't read the other ones, but I'm assuming they're pretty cool as well. But yeah, what did you have, Luke?
This week I'm recommending, maybe not recommending, but I'm talking about Nightwing 100. And so this is the 100th issue of, I believe it's Nightwing Volume 5, might be Volume 4, I'm not sure. But this run has been running for nearly 7 years since 2016.
I think I have a few from like 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, it started out really strong. Like the first 30 issues are really good. It kind of, I don't know, it's been hit or miss since then. But yeah, I talked about this, I think, a little bit last week with our Dark Crisis, but I was talking about how writer Tom Taylor, he's going to pick up the Titans book sometime this spring. And like he does fan service in like the worst way possible. I feel like it's just kind of there to fill space and be like, hey, this is that character you like, and there's not really a whole lot of substance going on.
Gotcha.
Like it feels like this book has been spinning its wheels for the past maybe a year and a half, 2 years. Like they've been teasing this villain Heartless, and they haven't really done anything with him. He's just kind of there at the end of every issue talking or whatever.
That's kind of dumb.
Yeah. And so the whole plot of this issue in particular is there is a privately owned prison in Bloodhaven, which is apparently a big problem, even though we haven't heard about it until now. And so it seems like he's just kind of preaching about prison reform, which I don't have an issue with, but it's like if you're gonna have a strong message in a story, whether it's a comic or a movie or whatever, you still have to have a strong story first.
Sure.
And I feel like he kind of forgets that. But then there's that. And so, there's a prison riot and all the supervillains come out. And so then all of Nightwing's friends shows up. The Titans are there. Superman's there. Batman's there. And they kind of just fight everybody, and that's it. But this issue begins and ends with him talking to Batman and the Justice League about like, we're kind of stepping down and you're going to be the leader of this new team, this new Justice League kind of thing.
It's kind of a lead it into Titans, the new series.
Yeah, kind of where Dark Crisis left off. So it's not terrible. There have been worse issues in this run, but it's also it could be a lot better. So
gotcha. Fair enough. So seems like maybe pick it up, but don't expect it to be great. No.
Yeah, if you're a collector, then probably pick it up. There's some cool art in it. Like they reference a whole bunch of different eras, like that picture you just had up. They in the comic itself, they kind of flip through all his different suits, but they skip over the red New 52 suit, which I thought was interesting. But
interesting,
yeah.
How do you feel about that suit? I know a lot of people hate it.
I kind of like the New 52 was my
Mm.
introduction to comic books, so I kind of have a
Okay,
soft
fair
spot
enough.
for it. So I
Yeah.
mean, I know people don't like it. If you grew up like with the Chuck Dixon Nightwing stuff, where
Mm,
it was blue, you probably wouldn't
yeah.
like it. But it's I have a soft spot for it.
I didn't mind the change. I mean, I would get it if he was like red forever, but I
Yeah,
thought, like they change characters' costumes a lot, go back and forth. I thought it was a cool change,
right.
and I think like it definitely looked really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely didn't have a problem with it, I guess.
Yeah. So pick it up if you're a collector. Like it's a jumbo issue.
Yeah.
But if you're just
Oh,
a
okay.
casual reader who's not really interested, like if you buy digital copies and you're not into
Hmm.
collecting, then I would probably skip it. But
Okay.
yeah, that's my
Fair
two
enough.
cents.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that is the end of our episode this week. We will be covering the last half of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow next week. So definitely be on the lookout for our next episode.
Yeah.
This has been TCN Presents the Cultured Pull List. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to help support us and help us bring you more content, check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd. And if you would like to support this show in particular, look for our show's tier on the Patreon page. Thank you to all of our current Patreon supporters. I have been your host, Michael Malillo, and my co-host is Luke S. Thanks again for joining us, and be sure to like and subscribe. If you would like to check out The Cultured Nerd on social media and check out the website, scan the QR code on the bottom left. And if you would like to check out me and Luke's personal YouTube and podcast and our socials, check out the QR code on the bottom right. We will see you next week.